What do I do in this portion of the video? Super Mario Bros. One of the all-time best fever dreams out there. This is the kind of dream you go to your psychiatrist about. Super Mario Bros. Is the first true side-scrolling platformer of its kind and easily the most influential. Jump around as Mario, an Italian plumber who slaughters millions of tiny brown creatures and eats strange mushrooms you probably shouldn't trust inside your body to get higher in order to save a princess from a giant turtle that breathes fire. I didn't know weed was legal here. The game was originally released in 1985 for the Famicom in Japan and later for the NES in 1985 in America and 1987 in Europe. At the time, this game was revolutionary. It had so many things the previous games just lacked entirely. So many things that made it a video game. When your competition is E.T., any game can be revolutionary. Let me give you a lesson real quick. It was the year 1982. There was a lot of what we called oversaturation in the mix. With the rise of several new consoles came the creation of many new games, and most of these games didn't even sell well, despite being overproduced. Whenever the public liked an idea, this meant one thing: plagiarism. As soon as a new idea hit the shelves and got received well by the public, then the race was on to be the first company to produce a carbon copy of it, with the most minimalistic changes. So many games got ripped off, recolored, re-released, and then these games got marketed as their own original game. Yet this still didn't stop some horribly deplorable titles from coming to light and gaining popularity for being so bad. The poor quality of titles such as E.T. and Atari's port of Pac-Man tarnished Atari's reputation and decreased consumer confidence. Atari was the dominant company in the home console industry, and they were putting out garbage like that? No wonder the opinion of the video game industry as a whole turned sour. So, due to a mix of bad titles, original ideas being stolen and milked out, which decreased sales, oversaturation of a ton of lazy games made to appeal to the rising generation of gamers, overproduction of said games by a margin of 175% when the total demand was only an increase of 100%, and an overall sales loss for most companies. The video game industry began to crash by 1983. So that's why they call it the video game crash of 1983. Revenue peaked at around $3.2 billion in 1983, then dropped to $100 million by the end of the crash in 1985. An astounding drop of almost 97%. Coming back from this was literally impossible. The industry was never going to be the same again. The video game industry was gone, irredeemably lost, and hopelessly failing. Well, I was right about one thing. The video game industry would never be the same again. 1985, Nintendo alongside their ingenious Shigeru Miyamoto released their new home console, the Famicom, in Japan, which quickly got localized in the US as the NES the same year. Alongside this came Super Mario Bros., the game that nearly single-handedly saved the gaming industry as a whole and changed it forever. At the time, and even to this day, this game was a masterpiece. We went from monochrome and bland textures and no visual appeal whatsoever to a full-on world that follows the character with legitimate animations and so much detail that you could actually tell what you were looking at. The game was very visually appealing and was a breath of fresh air for consumers. So much that it brought them back from the depths of despair E.T. had left them in. On top of that, the game played leagues better than anything that had come out before the NES era. Controls are smooth but tight. Gameplay was solid. The game was easy to understand and pick up, and it kept you hooked. You got addicted to it. It would keep you coming back for more. It was truly a marvel of its time, but now, it's iconic. So the game revolves around Mario, the main character, progressing through 8 different worlds, each with 4 different side-scrolling sub-levels known as stages. Throughout each level, you will run, jump, collect various power-ups, and deal with certain obstacles and enemies. Oh, and there's a timer for each level that kills you when it runs out, so have fun! Each level is unique, with a few different types of levels or themes spread out across the 8 worlds. Ground levels, underground levels, castle levels, underwater levels, sky levels. Each level is made up of blocks using a certain texture to fit the theme of the level. Each level is blocky and chunky, very smooth, very flat. The level design is pretty bland at times. Levels are generally very flat with a few floating platforms and random formations here and there. Some levels feel repetitive, despite also feeling like what's actually in the level may have been placed there randomly and on a whim. The way the game transitions through the different kinda level types is kinda confusing. So we go from a regular level above the ground to underground, then to a castle, back above ground, then underwater, then in the sky. Now everything's white and it's nighttime, and the game explains none of this to us. There's no explanation of how Mario got to any of these places. You could rearrange the levels in any order you like and it would be exactly the same because these levels aren't a part of some huge interconnected map or hub world. They're just one level after the other. There's no context! Speaking of random, remember when I said some stuff felt placed randomly about? Yeah. What even is this? What purpose does this even serve? They couldn't have made this look more natural? It looks so out of place and sticks out like a sore toe. Wait, that's not what the script said. Why is this Hammer Bros even here? Aren't Hammer Bros always on their ladder formation of blocks? Is he supposed to be here? Was he just sunning on this random staircase in the middle of nowhere and we just interrupted his beauty sleep? What even are half these things? This entire level's layout makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. Nintendo did it. Nintendo created Little Timmy. Water levels. Need I say more? As soon as you put something underwater, it's outside of Nintendo's expertise. Said expertise being not water levels. Water levels slow the game down considerably, often feel underwhelming in terms of gameplay, and are convoluted with enemies to make up for its lack of actual challenging obstacles. I think it's time to talk about that level. World 2-3. You're on a bridge in the sky, avoiding fish jumping out of the endless abyss of nothing to ruin your day. This level makes no sense. It's just fish and bridges and a few holes and what? And then it's back to your regularly scheduled program. Like, you play the rest of the game normally as if this level never happened? I don't even know. Enough bashing the level designs and themes already. The levels aren't without their flaws, but that's not to say they aren't without their strengths either. Most levels are visually appealing, and there are still a good number of well-designed stages in the game. Some levels even have little secrets, such as pipes leading to hidden rooms or warp zones at the end of cave levels that allow you to skip as much of the game as you want. Yeah, they are kinda busted. Honestly, enemy placement can feel a little random throughout levels at times, but for the most part, I have no complaints over the placement of enemies. Lakitu is rarely seen in the game, despite being such a neat concept in the game and an actual thought-provoking and challenging obstacle that didn't feel completely random. World 4-1, his premier level, basically felt so well designed around him and his ability, and ultimately made one of the best levels in the game. Yet I can count the amount of levels he stars in on one hand. Nintendo, why didn't you use the guy more? Wait, Bowser starts throwing hammers in World 6-4? Springs. These right here are a flawed concept. Essentially, you jump on the spring, right? You bounce off of it a little. Cool, isn't it? However, if you press the jump button at just the right time, the spring will launch you super high into the air. However, the window is so small and within such an awkward time frame that it makes it frustratingly hard at times to actually pull it off. And this is required to progress in some levels? Again, not a huge issue, just a flawed concept. And we have other things to get to, don't we? I talk about the stages so much because it makes up so much of the game. What do you think you're walking on, thin air? In a side-scrolling game, the stages are one of the most important aspects of the game itself. They set the tone, the mood, the speed of the game, the difficulty, the gameplay. They set the stage. If the stages aren't good, why even play the game? You ever wonder why E.T. was such a bad game besides the entire game itself? It's because its one stage, its one setting, was horrible. It looked ugly, was barely functional, was confusing, had no general concept and direction, and was just overall bad. Now, don't get me wrong, E.T. was just a bad game overall, and even with all the lists of downsides about the stages in Super Mario Bros., by no means are these stages bad. They all have a direction, a theme. They're never confusing. They're very functional, and they look good from a graphical and art style point of view. This game nails gameplay right in the head. It was smooth, solid, it was consistent, it was playable. The gameplay was a little rigid at times, but was overall good. So when you started the game, you would start out on the left side of the stage, with the main goal being to get to the flag on the far right side of the stage. Along the way, there are several obstacles there to ruin your perfectly good playthrough. You start out with 5 lives and can obtain more through various methods, such as getting a 1-up mushroom or collecting enough coins. Each time you die, you lose a life, and once you're out of lives, you basically have to start over. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention there's no save feature? You had to beat the entire 8 worlds in one sitting, or leave your NES running. But, to be fair, the concept of a side-scroller in a game that big in general was quite new, so a save feature either hadn't been developed yet that could work with it, or hardware and storage limitations of the NES and the cartridge prevented that from being possible. So, how do you prevent your plumber friend from having a seizure when he stubs his toe on a turtle going on a casual walk? This is where power-ups come into play. Enter World 1-1, where you first start as your small self. In this phase of existence, touching anything that's not solid ground will most likely result in death, so start bashing your head on question mark blocks until a mushroom pops out. To grow big. And I thought Mario spoke out against taking drugs at one time.
And if you do drugs, you go to hell before you die. Please.
As this new and improved Mario, you can take a hit without dematerializing. Sadly, taking damage will take these gains away from Mario, and falling in a pit or touching lava will kill you regardless, because falling eternally or burning alive doesn't depend on size. Unlike getting shot by a bullet the size of a full-grown Mario. You're telling me he eats these too? Alongside the mushroom, there's also the fire flower, which turns Mario into a pyromaniac convicted of 3 accounts of arson and multiple charges of murder. But at least he pays his taxes. Fireballs will kill enemies. Enemy hits Mario? Back to bite-sized Mario, which is kinda weird considering that when you get hit as Fire Mario, you turn into base form Mario, but when you grab a fire flower as base form Mario, you turn into Big Mario. Yeah, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but you can only become Fire Mario if you're Big Mario. Little hidden bit of trivia. Another bit of trivia, did you know Super Mario Bros. Was originally going to be a side-scrolling shooter game? Mario was gonna wield certain guns and ride on a dinosaur. Hint. It's Yoshi, and shoot enemies throughout a side-scrolling stage, but they later scrapped the idea. There is one more power-up to discuss. The Superstar. Collect this bad boy to become invincible and commit mass genocide, as touching Mario during this state causes death. However, falling in a pit or touching lava will still game end you, as they do not care about invincibility. Are we not going to mention how this random plumber just took a bite out of a literal star? Each power-up has visual changes that come with it. The mushroom makes Mario bigger, the Superstar makes Mario overdose on LSD, and the Fire Flower makes Mario's clothing turn to white and red.
So, what do you think? Don't try wearing it in Brooklyn.
These power-ups can be found in various question mark blocks and even sometimes in normal bricks. Otherwise, bricks usually give nothing, and question mark blocks typically give coins. So the graphics weren't that good. To be fair, this was 1985. The graphics weren't gonna be like Cyberpunk PS5 graphics, but for what they had at the time, the graphics were gorgeous. Now, compared to modern, realistic graphics-focused games, Mario's graphic power falls short. This is where we change the word graphics to art style. Mario's old art style is his most iconic iteration, and one of the most iconic figures of all time. And it still holds up to even modern renders of Mario, even being preferred over them in some cases. Almost anyone who's ever breathed in the same oxygen as Nintendo, as well as the rest of the planet, would instantly recognize any given object from the original Super Mario Bros. As a Mario thing. Yes, it's that iconic. On top of that, this game was far superior to anything that had come out prior in graphics and art style. Everything looked recognizable. You could actually tell what you were looking at. The world had a chunky, blocky, yet fluent feel. Everything looked like it belonged together and worked within the same art style perfectly. Let's talk about the music for a bit. Introducing the ground theme. A song composed by Koji Kondo to be used in the general overworld of the Super Mario Bros. Game to later become so popularized and well recognized that it became what is essentially Mario's main theme. This is, without a doubt, the most well-known and iconic song in gaming history, and very likely the most recognizable song of all time. And for good reason too, this song slaps. Actually, while Super Mario Bros. Didn't have a very large soundtrack as a whole, it was super good. One of the best video game soundtracks of all time and definitely the most iconic. And to think that NES sound chip only had 3 lines, a melody line, a bass line, and drums. And Koji Kondo used some of the most limited software to make some of the best songs of all time. All the music is fun, energetic, exciting. It was such a joy to listen to. Too late, didn't read. Super Mario Bros. Had good music. So, how does the game hold up today? Well, the game has a good art style, new for its time, yet solid gameplay and controls. Decent level design despite its shortcomings. A challenge, lovable and memorable music, even though it has a lot of shortcomings. It still holds up very well today. It's not some 4K AAA modern title, but to a lot of us, it's even better. This game was so many people's childhoods. They probably got this game alongside an NES or Famicom for Christmas on their birthdays. They probably switched out controllers with their siblings every time they died, secretly brooding their beloved family members' destruction. Until it's their turn again on the NES. You hear the ground theme almost everywhere, and every time it's played, it's a reminder to your childhood hero, Mario. The gameplay wasn't bad, far from it. It was kinda iffy at certain points, but was overall pretty strong for the time and even compared to modern games today. The visuals were gorgeous during its release, and its art style still holds up well with other pixel art games coming out these days, and it's super iconic. This game was new, this game was challenging, and that still holds nowadays despite being one of the most sped-run games of all time. I guarantee you, if you're watching this video, you've played this game at one point. Almost everyone has. If you've never beat it, go play it on one of your consoles. There's like 30 million ways to play it. You'll be able to get it somehow. Replayability is pretty good as well. Replaying levels and beating them faster feels good. But overall, the original Super Mario Bros. Is just a good game. And justifiably so. Not only did it save the video game industry, but it was also the start of something great. And everything must start somewhere. Hello, World Wide Web users. I'm your host, Colin T. Fite, and welcome to Let's Talk About.